on. That's basically for housekeeping. You are all in mute or in silent mode so that we can keep the presentation moving. Quickly, just a brief look at our agenda for today. I'm going to do a few introductions, get everybody introduced to the panel. And then I know that you're all going to be excited because our resident mixologist, Josh Gilstrap, will take us through the preparation of the wonderful cocktail that you should have gotten as a package earlier or last week, or hopefully by today. And you all get a chance to enjoy that. And then we will jump in and start the questions and answers. And again, try to provide you as much information as you can get. We've put together a very, very high level panel of experts in various fields that do revolve around the cannabis industry to provide you with knowledge and advice as you wade through this burgeoning and changing, ever-changing cannabis industries. So first of all, my name again is Frank Niesenbaum, VP of Sales for C2B Technologies. C2B is a full service provider of integrated software solutions for cannabis companies that includes accounting, distribution, growing, cultivation, extraction, processing, and of course, as we'll, I'm sure, talk about a lot today, compliance and extensive reporting capabilities. So with that, I'm going to start with the panel. First of all, we have with us Mary Jo Mahood, or MJ, as she likes to be called, with C2B Technologies. And MJ is our practice manager, has well over 20 years experience in the ERP software arena, but has extensive knowledge about all aspects of the ERP and financial software, specifically for cannabis and companies, and of course, metric and other compliance systems. Her financial accounting background is a plus when helping companies select and implement the right solutions. Welcome, Mary Jo.
Thanks, Frank.
Tom Herron is a partner with Franz Ward, LLP, and his practice is largely focused on representing licensed operators in the legal marijuana and hemp industries. Tom often serves as outside general counsel to his clients, assisting them with regulatory matters, mergers and acquisitions, litigation, and other day-to-day legal. He has practiced in this industry for the last several years, developing a national practice, and has become the go-to legal counsel in Ohio's cannabis industries. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Frank. Hi, everyone.
Harry Bernstein is the executive director of Verita Compliance Partners. Verita is a national consulting firm focused on guiding clients through federal cannabis permitting, taxation, and regulatory compliance. They advise cannabis cultivators, manufacturers, and processors, as well as ancillary service providers, on how to comply with current and future regulation. With decades of experience in high-level positions at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, BATF, and the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, TTB, the Verity team is uniquely positioned to be able to provide compliance services to cannabis industry stakeholders. Thanks for joining, Harry.
Thank you guys for having me.
Todd Tigges is the lead partner of UHY's National Cannabis Industry Practice. UHY is a traditional certified public accounting firm with 22 offices in the United States. And whether in need of traditional tax compliance and attest services, or more complicated entity design, financial modeling, or even a 280E analysis, which I know you all know about, or should, UHY has a dedicated team of industry professionals that can assist in all of your strategic and accounting needs. Welcome, Todd.
Thanks, Frank.
Bill Cicinaro and Ramagupta are with Kpis Insurance Group. Kpis is the largest privately held independent brokerage firm in Michigan with over 200 employees and a top 100 broker in the US. Kpis started 75 years ago by building specialized niche target markets, starting with golf courses and country clubs, food and agriculture, transportation, real estate, and of course now, cannabis. So welcome, guys. And last but not least, John Lane, who is with Middlefield Banking Company. John joined the Middlefield Banking Company in December 2018 as Executive Vice President, Chief Credit and Risk Officer. John manages credit, risk, and loan administration departments at the bank. Middlefield Bank is a state of Ohio chartered institution that services the marijuana-related businesses, MRB as we know it, marketplace. John is actively involved in being both a banker and a trusted advisor to the bank's MRB customers. So that's everyone. Last but not least, John, welcome everyone.
Frank.
We appreciate your joining us today and look forward to spirited conversation about some very important topics to our people. Without further ado, Josh, our resident mixologist, is going to take you through preparing the awesome cocktail that we have for you. So hopefully you'll have the package and you're all ready. And Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Frank. I'll get started just as soon as we stop the screen share.
I did. Oh, there you go.
There we go. All right, my name is Joshua Gilstrup, and I had the pleasure of working in the bar and restaurant industry for about 10 years prior to my, sorry, Frank, it looks like you're the only one pinned there, so they're staring at you. Do you want to hide yourself there?
I can see you.
Sure.
Oh, you got me? Okay, perfect. All right.
Yep.
I see everybody.
I was looking at was you, Frank, and it just was not really doing it for me. So
Thanks, Josh.
did my study for about 10 years in the bartending industry, and then worked in catering out here in LA for about 4 years after that. And what I learned in catering specifically was that the supplies come and we just make what we have in front of us. And so throughout that time, I was fortunate enough to play with some cool ingredients and made up a few fun drinks. One of them was what we're making today. It's called the New Fashioned. So if you have your kits, you should have gotten a lemon, a little mini clear bottle of clear liquid simple syrup, another darker glass bottle of bitters, a mini bottle of vodka, and a small can of club soda. Those are going to be the ingredients we have today. So all you'll need to jump into this mix, if you haven't done it already, get ice and put it into the glass or the plastic shaker that was in your kit. Fill your plastic shaker with ice. I'm gonna give you a couple seconds to do that. And while that's happening, we will discuss the two bitters that I have actually extra here, which weren't included in your kit, but I would highly recommend. So when I first made this drink, it was just this bitters, the vodka, the simple syrup, and the club soda with the lemon. After that, a friend of mine working came up with this particular idea. It's another bitters called Pashot's bitters. It's got a more cinnamon forward flavor to it. And so in the future, if you ever want to pick that bottle up, it's the same recipe, except instead of 2 dashes of this bitters, it's 1 dash of the regular bitters and 1 dash of the Pashot's. And it does open up the drink just a bit more. The last bitters that I have on the table, which isn't for this drink in particular, but I just love it. If you like vodka drinks or gin drinks, I highly recommend getting a bottle of lavender bitters. Lavender bitters is just a cool way to open up kind of any drink that you have. And what I'm going to go into today essentially is just the basic building blocks for a beverage. Any beverage. There's two that you always begin with. Trade these out. Is going to be, if we've got it right now, we can jump into it. You'll take that lemon that we gave you, and for you guys at home, you're going to cut it into quarters, so into wedges. Cut that like just into squeezable wedges. For me, I'm going to do in a half because I have one of these. Another item I would highly recommend is a juice squeezer. Works really well for any type of cocktails you want to make, and it gets every bit of that juice out of there, unless you're going to be buying it, from the store. And fresh squeeze is always the way to go. So in any beverage, you start with 2 ingredients, a sweet and a sour. The sour is either a lemon or lime, or a combination of both, but we'll squeeze our lemon into it. So for those at home, you squeeze half of the lemon in, so 2 of the quarters. And get it in there. And then you'll take your simple syrup in that clear bottle that you got, and I would say you can use probably about maybe 1/3 of that. But if you look into your shaker, wherever the juice comes up in the ice, you want to match that. So double the height of that with your simple syrup. So the idea of building a cocktail is equal parts sweet and equal parts sour. You want the same amount of both. That way they balance each other out. That's what they call a balanced drink. After that, we can add our alcohol, and that's just going to be your entire small bottle, which you were given. For me, if you have a large bottle or a speed pour, it's 2 ounces or an 8 count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And typically speaking, your ice will float at that point if you've done a 3/4 fill on the glass. That's another kind of cheat way to do it. Next, you'll take your bitters that were provided to you, and with that, there's a dropper inside. So for the dropper, I would say squeeze it out and then fill it one time, one full tube of dropper, squeeze that in. That'd be good. For me, I'm going to do 1 dash of that and 1 dash of the other. And that's it. Now, never put your bubbles in the shaker. It will explode. So take your shaker cap, screw it on the top, flip it over. Well, actually, you don't flip yours over. You just shake it. But make sure the cap's sealed on tight, both sides, and just shake away. Now, this in the industry is what we call a dirty pour. You do have a built-in strainer on the top of yours, but since there was no muddled fruit or anything like that, it would break up and become, stuck in your teeth inside of the beverage. You can pour it right into the glass. And the other benefit of my Peugeot's bitters, the red color, gives it that really lovely pink flavor, or pink coloring, I should say. It makes it just beautiful for the presentation. Your last touch is going to take your can of bubbly and fill it to just below the rim of your glass you've chosen. Give it a little stir. And voila. We have a new fashioned. And the reason it's called a new fashioned, as you probably guessed, it uses bitters, but instead of whiskey, we use vodka. So it's a new take on an old item. If you guys have any questions, let me know, but that you should enjoy for the duration of our meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. That was great. Okay, I'm going to go back.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm curious how the panelists, if the panelists are trying it, if you enjoy it, you gotta let me know, because that's what I do it for. Not for me.
I'm sure they will.
Pretty good.
Nice. Refreshing, right?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Very refreshing. Unfortunately, it's going to snow tonight, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it would have been more
Definitely
appropriate
gonna-
last week. It's very, very good.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks, Josh. That was great. Hope everybody that is attending was able to make the cocktail and will enjoy it as we get going. So we're going to kick this off. And you should be able to follow along and see the questions that we're bringing to the table on the screen. And number one, all of you in some way are trusted advisors to the customers, clients, and prospective clients you talk with. So we're curious just what experiences you have had in the cannabis industry today, kind of where the market's where it's going. And Tom, why don't you kick it off and get us started with some of your thoughts? Oh, you're muted, I think. Make sure you all unmute yourself, at least the panelists.
Looks like he's having some technical difficulties there,
Yeah.
Frank.
Okay, well, then Rama, Bill, why don't you guys get started?
Sure, I can take this one. So I don't know if anybody else made a mess like I did while making the drink, but you just can't see it, but there's definitely a mess on my desk. So from kind of what we've been seeing in the cannabis industry as it relates to the insurance and risk management side, that are unique, not only are cannabis companies just like normal companies, they just have added risk with more red tape and compliance measures. So 5 years ago, the options in the insurance side were very limited. The coverage you got was really crap compared to what you had to pay for it. So we've seen the market mature. There's a lot more carriers and insurance products that are available now as opposed to 5 years ago. And we're finding that for the insurance carriers, class of business is actually quite profitable. There's not very many claims compared to other market or industry classes. From an industry standpoint, we're seeing the operators become more sophisticated with a degree of vertical integration, and those tend to be also the most risk conscious and responsible operators as well. We're definitely predicting that in the next few years, we'll see some consolidation within the vertically integrated operators within the industry.
Yeah, that's good information. Yeah, a lot of that's, we see a lot of that. Tom, I think you're in business now.
Yeah, I think I should be good. I appreciate everybody bearing with me. So I think that's exactly right. I mean, a cannabis business is like any other normal business. They have the same types of legal problems that you would expect any business to have. They got issues with their employees. They got issues with their contracts, with their vendors, with their real estate. They're trying to raise money. To that extent, the industry has really matured into a normal industry, except that the conflict between state and federal law, that is the current federal prohibition of marijuana, sort of infects every aspect of their business. And then you add on top of that, this is a very state by state by state industry. So you also have this infection of particular state regulatory concerns that also impact every decision that these companies make. And that translates into issues with getting insurance, issues with getting banking, access to capital, access to financing, problems with implementing business-wide policies, for example, right? You may have a certain type of process for inventory management or certain labor policies in state A that either don't apply or are potentially unlawful in state B. So there's this added level of regulatory complexity for the industry that you don't really see in other segments of our economy.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned banking. John, what are your thoughts? I mean, obviously, banking.
Yeah, and thanks, Frank. Yeah, banking within Ohio, medical marijuana is where we are participating in deposit services, and that federal and state infection. It has a problem in the banking industry, but generally speaking, we found that in most states where there is some aspect of medical or recreational that has been legalized, there is banking available. Probably usually smaller community-based institutions or credit unions that can operate within state law. And that's what we're seeing, and what we're doing is we're able to do that within the state of Ohio. Ohio is still in its infant stages in the industry. It's growing, it's gaining traction, and trying to service more customers, I think, than was originally expected at the outset. The issue is really providing banking services has regulatory and compliance issues on our side, so there's a cost to that, and that's really what we try to talk to our prospective customers is about that cost and the benefits of being able to bank with a more conventional bank, but there's a cost associated with it, unfortunately, that we also have to talk to the customers about.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Harry, your thoughts? Uh-oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
We came into this industry with a background in regulatory compliance at the federal level, and saw that at some point it's going to have to happen with cannabis. So initially, our clients they didn't want to deal with even thinking about federal regulation or any type of federal oversight because they didn't have to at the time. So they ignored it. It's complicated. It's constantly changing. As we all know, it changes on a daily basis of what's going on at the federal level. And it seemed far off. Well, that changed. And now all of a sudden, we are having those conversations of what do I need to do to prepare for this oncoming federal regulation. Some want to sit back and wait till it's written. Others are being proactive and working with us on what's coming forth. For example, the recent vape compliance regulations put a lot of CBD and cannabis manufacturers under federal oversight for the first time ever. And then the other piece of what we're doing is we're constantly working with our contacts, be it at TTB or our local legislatures, trying to gauge from them what's going on and how we think things are going to shape out as well.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. We're going to talk about that a little more later, I'm sure. So Todd, as an accountant, I look to the accountant in the room to tell me what they're seeing.
Sure, thanks, Frank. And we've been involved in the industry now for actually back since 2017. So on a national platform, and I think that exposure to a national platform has really kind of handed down a few of the the points that were made here earlier in terms of that it's really state by state, and there's so much differences between each of these states and some of the regulatory things. And then you have the, the federal illegality of the whole operations, that as we're starting to see kind of the marketplace come into more of that maturity side of things, we look at things like when we want to diversify into more than one state, right? The multi-state operators now, as we get more vertically integrated, as we try and expand and continue to grow our footprint, whether it be regional or even national, you're starting to see, some of those hurdles and hiccups that we've just identified here with insurance, with legal aspect of things. Is state by state, it's all different. So I think as we're starting to see that come to fruition, that's kind of where we're at. In addition, we've got kind of companies starting to look to the public market, right? How do we monetize that original investment? So they're looking to go public. And as we know here in the United States, you can't list on this New York Stock Exchange, right? So how do you do that? You have to be a Canadian company. So we're looking at those types of things too. So I think you really see, the marketplace is definitely starting to mature. But we're still at the early stages of that maturation for sure.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. So MJ, wrap us up and talk about us from what you're seeing. I know we're seeing a lot in our area.
We certainly are, Frank. We're seeing a lot of growth. It's just explosion amount of growth within inside the industry, and we're seeing that the cannabis businesses really, they need to find a solution that can grow with them and not basically stunt any type of growth path that they might be on. With what some of my esteemed panelists were saying in terms of being almost on a cusp of the federal regulation, this is not the time for reworking any of your business software. So if you're new in the industry, if you're just starting out, or if you're starting to experience growth, lay that foundation. Choose a software that's going to adapt and grow with you and not limit the growth. That's what we've seen and what we've been able to help clients with from that perspective. And we were also able to leverage our extensive background in manufacturing and horticultural spaces that we have worked within, because cannabis companies, they're truly no different. They have some nuances like the federal regulations that we have to ensure that they can stay compliant with and make sure that they have the information they need to find when they need it. But they're no different. So just for us, it's helping clients find that platform because that's what they need.
Makes a lot of sense. That's great stuff, guys and gals. I appreciate all the information. Kind of shifting just a little bit. I know, and I know you guys all have a lot of different opinions on this part of the process, but a lot of these companies, or a lot of them, have started out or primarily were in cash basis or cash only types of businesses and what they were doing. But I know that's changing somewhat. So what advice can you give them in that area? I know, John, I'm sure you have extensive knowledge from a banking perspective on what that is.
Yeah, unfortunately, the cash nature of the business is really difficult for some folks. Our experience in getting into the industry over the last several years is that where cannabis is legal, either medically or recreationally, there are institutions that are willing to work with MRBs and bank them and provide deposit and account services. It's really just a matter of finding out which institutions they are. They're usually, like I said before, community-based or credit unions that have the ability to operate within the state legality and skirt to a certain extent the federal regulations through the processes that the banks have to follow to be compliant with the FDIC. But they're out there. They're generally out there in every area and can provide services. There's just the biggest hurdle, it seems, is the cost. And that's really the part that keeps people maybe operating in cash and not seeing the benefit. And that's, I think, the thing you have to weigh.
Yeah, makes sense. Tom, thoughts from a legal perspective?
Yeah, I mean, our clients have been very lucky, largely thanks to John, that they have access to bank accounts. I mean, when a client comes to me and says, I need to find a bank that's willing to help me, my first referral is to John over at Middlefield, because I know how well they work with operators here in Ohio. And, so we have not, or at least our clients haven't had too much of an issue getting access to banking. There's a very robust due diligence process before you can get that account open. So I like to make that introduction as early as I can in the attorney-client relationship. The next hurdle that we're hoping will be overcome here relatively soon is access to financing and lending from financial institutions, so that our clients that have these outrageous, private money lender relationships at 15-20% interest can go get a loan at a more reasonable rate to help finance their business. So, the House, I think, voted today or end of yesterday to pass the Safe Banking Act. And so, we're getting some messages from Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, that he's not intending to bring the Safe Banking Act up separate from a broader decriminalization or descheduling proposal, because he thinks that if he brings it up separately, that there are a number of senators that would vote for safe banking but would not vote for overall reform, and he wants to tie the two together. So we'll see how that goes, but we're hoping that we can get some relief at the federal level.
Makes sense. Harry, I know you have federal thoughts.
Right, and I was going to touch on a lot of what Tom said later on in the conversation, but from a federal standpoint in the cash issue, it's been reported and our teams confirmed that the TTB, Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, is already fielding questions from congressional staffers. So it would appear that they're going to be in charge of regulatory oversight. And what we know from past experience in the alcohol and tobacco industry, they'll do a deep dive into where the source of your funds came to start your business, whether it's cash or otherwise. So regardless of whether you're dealing in cash or not, you're going to have to know exactly where it came from and have incredible accounting records, which a lot of the people on this panel take care of already or advise the clients to do so. So they'll do a pretty, again, deep dive into where that money's coming from.
Anything from an accounting perspective, Todd, that you think is of importance? I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the keys here too is as you hinted on, cash, right? So because these businesses are so cash intensive, and we're not just talking small dollar amounts either. It's very typical for these larger operators to have a couple $100,000 on hand in their safes. So I think the importance of internal controls is so important when creating your financial environment, your accounting environment, to make sure that there are proper controls, that we don't want to lose sight of that as well. Because when you have the cash on hand, whether it be not so much at the grow level, but at the dispensary locations and the retail level, you see a large amount of cash volume that you definitely want to make sure we don't forget about those internal controls related to the handling of the cash as well. Segregation of duties is very important.
Yeah, makes sense. And Rama or Bill, I know that insurance has something to say about it.
As always, what could possibly go wrong in an industry that is 100% cash and the product is green gold? Amazing, untraceable green gold, as a matter of fact. Obviously, there's some issues there on the actual cash as well as product. Crime insurance is key. Risk management is key. 90% of the claims we see in our industry are theft, whether it's product or cash. So obviously the controls Todd talked about are extremely important. If I'm in choosing a trusted advisor, no matter how small you are or how big you grow, you want to make sure that you get somebody that has market access. Again, as Rama pointed out earlier, this market is maturing now. A lot more players in the insurance industry are coming into it. A lot more will if it becomes federally sanctioned as well, in addition to banks. But internal controls that Todd mentioned, with the whole process of applying for crime insurance, you go through a lot of those. find a trusted advisor that knows risk management, that knows loss control, and it'll put you with the market that has the highest limit. Usually it's $1 million now, but it's probably going to be going up. $1 million in this industry isn't necessarily a whole lot of coverage. So those are very, very key issues. Obviously, the latest in motion detection and biometric vaults, all of those things are important. Most of it is the controls that you have in place that everyone's mentioned here, as well as employment screening, very key. Employment screening is very, very important. A good risk management consultant can help you with that as well.
That's great information. Why you guys are trusted advisors is obviously clear from the conversation. Shifting just a little bit, MJ, I know this is right up our alley and in terms of what you're dealing with, but there's so many different solutions out there, software, reporting, all those seed to sale and all the things that obviously out there. What kind of advice do you give them for what they should be looking for in these solutions? Obviously, there's a lot to it.
Sure, Frank. There is. I would say that the number one factor, and in my humble opinion, is the most important, would be to look at the cost versus the value. At the top of all our minds right now is price, and in the times that we find ourselves in, we're all worried about that. But all that said, when you're reviewing the software to run your cannabis business, you really need to evaluate that for the value it can bring to your cannabis, not just today, but think about what it is going to bring to you in the future, in the next 12, 18, 48 months. Things like how much labor time will the software save due to any automation that it can bring to you and any streamlining that it will give you? How much effort are you going to save when you're trying to stay compliant with the regulations? So for example, if you're categorizing and pulling together all the backup documentation that you need to send over to Todd for the 280E reporting that he's helping you with. So everybody that's on this or attending this webinar, I'm sure that they're not only investing an immense amount of time and money and effort to make sure that you are following the rules, but budget for that expensive software. Don't just look at it for what it's going to give you today. Don't get that instant gratification, because now is not the time. This industry is just growing, like I had mentioned earlier. And if you don't have that solid foundation, you're going to stunt any growth capabilities that you have. And you don't want a solution that's going to hold you back. That should not be the reason why you can't grow your business. And then lastly, and most importantly, I would say when you start to look for that software, make sure that you're vetting the providers. There are a ton of providers out there. A lot of these seed to sale companies have just started in the last several years. And the last thing that you want to do is pick a provider that's not going to be around and start to disappear as you start to grow. So make sure you're talking to your provider and finding out how long have they been in business. What experiences can they bring to the table for you, not just today, but into the future. You want to look for a partner. Don't look for what I always call like a copier repairman. Find a partner.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I understand that very well. Todd, I know you have to deal with it. Obviously, systems are important in what your clients are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really to kind of piggyback off of MJ's comments there, really, to one, have a partner that understands all the software that they're recommending and looking to provide, but two, making sure that it is truly a fully integrated package. Because so many times we'll see, they might have an inventory package, but does that truly integrate within your financial record keeping and also your POS system, right? Are they integrated as one kind of seamless unit, or are you having to do double or even triple entry type of accounting daily types of transactions or daily types of functions, if you will. So I think that is just so important. Not to mention, as MJ correctly pointed out, the ability to grow and continue, while you might an off-the-shelf accounting package that you think, well, it's not that big deal to make a double entry. Well, maybe not if you're only doing a couple $1 million worth of revenue. But as we've quickly seen, these companies will grow to 10, 20, 30, 50, even $100 million as you become more vertically integrated. And as you continue to grow, does your computer software really have that ability to grow with you? And then, from that standpoint, could that be holding you back from that eventual exit? Because when it comes to valuations and looking at what a company is worth, there's a lot of stock that's placed in how good of internal reporting do they have? How good can they show and demonstrate that the numbers that they're presenting to a potential suitor, potential buyer, are accurate and reflective of what they're actually doing? Do we have, the proper reporting systems in place to be able to give you, those financial metrics, if you will?
Yeah, well, and great segue. I like the way you did that. Tom, talk about metrics and KPIs and compliance. I think you might have some thoughts about that as well. So.
Yeah, so because this is such a state-by-state industry, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to come into a new market and really try to identify KPIs or metrics for your business. And that can really impact your ability to raise money at the front end. I've got a client who is a startup, and when they went out to raise their first round of seed funding, they refused to provide financial projections and were very transparent about the reason why. They said, look, I could put a bunch of wild ass guesses on a piece of paper, but that's all they are. So if you're going to invest in our company, you're going to invest in us as a team. And they actually were more successful than some of our clients who put those WAGs on a piece of paper and went out and solicited investors or investment from sophisticated investors who looked at them like they were crazy, because in about 30 seconds, those investors can identify that these are projections and you don't know what the market is going to look like. So it can be really difficult to do that and to have those projections in a new market. And that's something that I think a lot of young cannabis companies don't anticipate.
Yeah, MJ, I know the systems have something to do with that too, if they're thinking about it, as you said a minute ago.
Yep, that they sure do. And what I would say to anyone out there is to make sure that you do it sooner rather than later. Just start. I know it can be very overwhelming, but consider KPIs to be like milestones on your road to your cannabis business success. So monitoring those KPIs is going to help you identify the progress towards your sales goals, your marketing, your financial, your customer service goals. And every cannabis business will also have its own unique set of goals and KPIs that it wants to track. And so it sounds like there's a lot, and there is, but what I would tell you to do is just select 2 or 3. Don't go crazy. Just 2 or 3 to start. Start small, get them out there, narrow it down to the most impactful data points that you need. Because remember, tracking KPIs isn't the end of the story. You can have all these great dashboards that we can create for you with beautiful charts that look gorgeous. You might even want to frame on a wall, but the real value in those KPIs lies in the actionable insights that you are going to take away from analyzing that data. So
that's all great. Yeah, great advice from everyone. Kind of shifting a little bit as we start to talk about some of the challenges and changes that people are experiences in their businesses, but kind of from your perspective in your specific area. I know, Harry, you talked a lot about, or at least you were trying to get into the federal regulation, some of that, and in those areas. Give us some thoughts about that. Oh, you're muted. We all got to remember.
It's become a good habit to mute.
I said being polite is a good thing, especially on a webinar. I think we're doing great with 6 people.
Right. So if you look at it, again, everything's fluid and based on the most recent information, it's really looking like, and Tom mentioned it earlier, that the Senate's going to come out with a comprehensive bill. And looking at the MORE Act, which passed the House last year, defined cannabis manufacturers and processors and cultivators as tobacco manufacturers, you can look at that as kind of a model. So federal licensing and compliance is going to look a lot different than state licensing. So what you had to do to get a license in Ohio or Missouri or New York is going to have nothing to do really with the federal licensing requirement, outside of the fact they're going to require that you have a state license at some point. Big, huge difference is most states cap their licenses. We don't believe the federal government will. It's going to be an open system. If you comply, you'll get a license. What does that mean? It means if there's 10 to 15,000 cultivators, processors, manufacturers, they're going to all have to try to get a license at the same time if they want to stay compliant with federal law. Another issue is in most states, and I know in Ohio, if you have any type of drug conviction, you can't be an employee. My understanding, and Tom, correct me, generally you can't be an employee, an owner, director, such as that. At what we think is going to happen with the federal laws, they're actually going to make room for people with prior convictions to become part of the industry as sort of a restorative justice situation. So those are two big differences. Overall point being is it's a whole new set of rules you're going to be looking at, and there's going to be a lot of people looking to comply at the same time. So that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Rama, thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest challenge that all cannabis companies are facing, whether they've realized it or not, is they're growing very quickly. While growth is great, it's good and solves a lot of issues, there's also a lot of growing pains that come with fast growth. Your people, your employees are one of your greatest assets. It's also one of the most overlooked areas of risk. They're also a great liability. So the cannabis companies, they grow very quickly, they hire a lot of people, and they don't have the proper systems, processes in place, that can result in not having successful outcomes. So one of the solutions to mitigating risks associated with growing very quickly is to ensure you have a strong management team in place, which includes an HR team to help with hiring, onboarding, and compliance, safety processes, and vendor partners, which you can grow with and be an extension of your team. Employment-related suits are the leading cause of claims within industry currently and in the U.S. as a whole.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Tom, I don't know if you had some thoughts based on what Harry said too, in terms of some of these challenges.
One of the biggest challenges our clients face is the ever-changing regulatory landscape. Because our oldest really substantial regulated market, and I say that regulated market, we're not even a decade in to really strong, meaningful regulations in any state. So the states are all figuring it out. And that means their regulations are constantly evolving. And that's hard enough when you are in one state, let alone maybe a multi-state operator and having to monitor all of these, the idiosyncrasies of each market that you're participating in. And then you get, one of our clients made an acquisition across the pond in Europe. And that's a whole other ball of wax from a standpoint of cannabis regulation. So that to me is one of the biggest issues, is just from an overall compliance standpoint, because if you're not compliant, you won't be operating for very long.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I know, MJ, you have thoughts about compliance because we deal with it in the solutions we're working with.
Sure. And I would say that staying compliant and reporting are probably in one of the biggest areas that I feel that these cannabis companies are experiencing. And what I mean by that is that they're able to run their business, but they're doing it with these disparate systems. So how do they really know whether or not they are meeting the regulation and compliances that they need? They've got a disparate accounting system, and then they've got to go over to, say, metric, and they've got to maintain information there. And they're really not able to be effective in managing their business. inventories in two places. They have to reconcile it. They have no real way to manage their crop cycle. So they're spending way too many man hours entering that data to just ensure that they're compliant and make sure that they can run a business and operate. And yet mistakes are happening. So they're just growing at such a fast pace that it's just really hard for them to do this.
Yeah, and compliance is going to get worse, right? We're gonna
Yeah.
switch. So the elephant in the room, and I know you've all been talking about it a little bit, and we've heard it, but what are your thoughts about the impending federal legalization or legislation that's going to come? Bill or Rama, why don't you kick it off and start us on that?
Bill, you're muted.
Yeah, I technically challenged over here. Yes, we've covered a lot of these things in the last conversation, but obviously if the feds go ahead and obviously through the House and the Senate and legalize it to some extent, Harry's mentioned there's going to be a huge rush to it. From our aspect in insurance, it's somewhat going to open the floodgates to a lot of players that have been on the sidelines jumping in. That's insurance carriers, that's insurance agents, that's just about everybody. So you're going to definitely see a huge amount of carriers involved. It's good for the industry. Obviously, there's more choice. Again, you want to look to see who has the most market clout as well as market access. And going forward to that, banking is obviously going to be wide open again. The cash problem will be a little bit different, but you're going to see again a lot of more sophisticated money joining, publicly traded companies joining. So just about everything we talked about, obviously from the insurance point of view and a growth standpoint, the areas to grow in and all of the compliance issues. Rama mentioned all of the HR issues will just multiply as there's going to be a race to get big and either exit or just get big and dominate. So it'll be an interesting time, and it's probably not that far off now.
Yeah, it makes sense. And of course, in an industry that has some regulation in it, right, John? Banking, I'm sure, is looking forward to federal legislation, right?
We are, and it will be interesting to see how that does affect banking. It certainly will drive deposit services costs down immediately. More competition will enter the space, and I think cost of capital lending will begin to occur as banks see certainty in their ability to lend into businesses that have viable futures and have either projected or performed well into the future. So I think it will be really interesting to see how fast the floodgates do open. But I think there are institutions that are waiting for that opportunity and that certainty to participate in the sector once it's federally legal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Harry, I know with all the ATF and all the experience you've had over the years, you have something to say about the federal government.
Right. It's well, there's a lot of things we can say, but we're going to stick to the topic. Anyway,
yeah,
it was really interesting. It changes constantly. Senator Booker came out with what I thought was an interesting comment yesterday. It was reported yesterday. Anyways, he said, and it was trying to. The question was whether President Biden would be on board with such a situation, because he said he isn't for full legalization. That was the term. Senator Booker differentiated legalization from descheduling and regulation. He's, what his point was is we're not making federal laws on how cannabis is going to be handled. It's very, very similar to the 21st Amendment in 1933. The states are already handling it legally. What we're going to do is deschedule it, so it doesn't you don't have to deal with the 280Es of the world or certain things like that. But we're going to implement oversight and regulation and restorative justice provisions. And so, it's now becoming a question of, will they get limited from form in the through a bill, or will they go for more comprehensive limited reform? There's no doubt it would pass. It passed the House with a 75% vote last night. You've got 35 senators already co-sponsoring the same bill, so it clearly would pass. But there are two obstacles. You have Majority Leader Schumer, who says he's not bringing anything to the floor unless it's a comprehensive bill. And you also have Senator Brown from Ohio, who's chairman of the banking committee, where that bill would have to go through. And he's come out a couple of times and said he's not bringing forth any bill that addresses banking alone. And what he sees, and it's true, that bill, although it benefits the industry quite a bit, the cannabis industry, it's really more for the financial institutions who want to get some clarity, but also want their share of the revenue. So, and Tom, again, I keep referring to you, Tom, because you're making great points. Everybody's making great points, but you and I are in the same space to some extent, that we think it's going to have a hard time getting through the Senate, just limited reform. Now, that being said, where does comprehensive reform come in? First of all, you've got strong voter support. It's now becoming an election issue. The most recent polls, 2 came out this week, 90% of the Americans are in favor of either medical or, and that was a Pew poll, medical or adult use. And then 70% in a Gallup poll support adult use. You have congressional leadership support for for descheduling regulation. And you also are sitting there with 7 Republican senators in states where cannabis is legal for adult use. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to pass a comprehensive bill. We discussed it. Congressional staffers are already talking to DTB, not just about regulation, but what form regulation is going to take place. So, and I saw it in a report the other day, it's no longer a matter of when cannabis will be regulated at the federal level, but I'm sorry, it's not a matter of if, it's when and how they're going to regulate it.
Yeah.
So that's what we're focusing on, and that's what we want to help our clients do, is focus on and coordinate with the rest of the people on this panel. What can we do to comply with the oncoming federal regulations?
Yeah. Tom, what are your thoughts? Makes a lot of sense. Harry had a lot to say. It made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm fascinated to see the form that we start with, a comprehensive reform effort in Congress, and sort of what we end up with. The MORE Act passed the House of Representatives last fall or winter. I forget when exactly it passed, but the last Congress, it passed the House. But I view that vote as symbolic, and it was a vote. It was an easy one because they knew it was never going to come up for a vote in the Senate, so they could put whatever they wanted in that bill and make a statement. But there was really no risk of losing anything because it was never going to pass in the first place. And I'm interested to see how that changes now that you have Democratic control in the Senate and at least a relatively favorable White House, which is a totally different dynamic. And so now they're going to have to thread the needle of, we took this stand, we made this statement only a few months ago, and now you're going to ask maybe more progressive members of the Democratic caucus to vote on something that is not as progressive. At the same time, you're asking more conservative-leaning Democrats or more conservative-leaning Republicans to vote on maybe descheduling marijuana at the federal level. And they might, even if they're okay with that, they might not be okay with some of the restorative justice provisions and automatic expungements and those sorts of elements. And so you're really it's going to be fun to kind of watch the sausage get made, so to speak, on these reform efforts.
Yeah. Go ahead, Harry. I think it's something else.
Yeah, and Tom raised a good point. And what I find interesting is almost looking at what happened in New York as kind of a model, because it's the same type of thing. The governor came in with his idea of federal regulation or state regulation, and then the state assembly came out with a different idea on how they wanted to see things. So, and it seemed to be the sticking points where a lot of things touched on. Number one was home grow, what to be done about that. Some states don't allow it at all. Others put it in on a limited basis. Where the funding's going to go, how much is going back into communities that have been devastated by the war on drugs, and then again, how they're going to treat those expungements and past convictions. And at some point, I'm with Tom. It's going to be interesting. The news will be busy every day once Senator comes out with this bill. And that's why we're all having these conversations we're having with people we know in the industry, right?
Yeah.
We want to be part of the conversation.
Makes a lot of sense. And you guys had a lot to say about it. Makes the federal legislation, whatever's going on there, makes a lot of sense. So we're getting close to the end of time. We'll probably run over a little bit. What I'd like to do is, obviously, each of you being experts in your field and of course, trusted advisors that provide a lot of information, kind of just, to wrap it up, talking about just some general advice around your area or any area that you might have to offer up to our guests and give them something to walk away with. Mary Jo, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, sure. I would say, I just reiterate what my theme has been, which has really been planning for the future. So make sure that when you're looking from an ERP perspective, an accounting software perspective, that you're buying for that future. Because like I said before, now is not the time to, as you're growing exponentially, to try and rework your foundation of your software house. So make sure you buy for the future, Frank. It'll help you ease the burden of trying to stay with all of your compliancy and your reporting and all the new regulations coming out.
Yeah, included in that budget, right? When you put that budget together.
Correct. Yes.
So Todd, I know it's a lot of your clients, or you have a lot of clients and clients that are getting involved in the industry. So I'm sure there's something there from you.
Absolutely. So one of the things I think, kind of hinting even to Mary Jo's point there, is don't be cheap on your accounting side of things. Often, clients getting into the industry spend a lot of money on the upfront costs for the development, their building, their equipment, and everything else, which is all important. But sometimes the accounting function kind of takes a back seat, and their budgetary analysis, and that's one of the key. The accounting side really drives the success or failure of the business. So, if you surround yourself with a team of good professionals, don't make sure that they have experience in the industry. They're aware of what's really going on. And I think that's going to be one of the key things that's going to differentiate you as a success versus a potential failure, or not be able to kind of take it to the end game. So I think that's the key is don't be cheap on the professional side of things.
Yeah. With everybody that's on this call, I think would echo that statement, right? That's where it's at. Tom, your thoughts in terms of advice?
You have to do the things that aren't sexy first. You need to have your banking relationship established. You need to have your insurance policies in place to protect against your risk. You need to have your legal advisors to make sure that your documents are in order, particularly if you're taking money from other people. You have to have your compliance folks on board, your software integrated into your system, because that's how your dream falls apart, right? If you don't do those things well, it's like building a house. You got to start with the foundation before you can paint and add the carpet and get the fancy furniture. So you have to make sure you do all of that stuff. It's all so important.
Yeah, sound advice. Rama, Bill, anything from the insurance guys' advice? It sounds like we're hearing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just from a general perspective for advice, partner with the best-in-class service providers. Choose partners which can grow with you from the startup phase through the potential exit. As a cannabis operator, you're likely to grow very quickly. There's a lot of moving pieces, so make sure your service providers are positioned to move quickly and grow with you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. John, the bank's got something to say. I know it.
All great points made so far from the banking perspective, at least in the current environment. Be open, be transparent with your financial provider, work with them. Each bank has significant due diligence requirements that they're going to have to address, but they're interested in doing business with you. So be open, be transparent, and work with them. Let them know what your business is and what it's about, and what your plans are, so they can support you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. And Harry, wrap us up.
Yeah, it's just everybody said the same thing. It's build a good team, build good partners, and prepare. You don't want to wait to the last minute as things are constantly changing and say, okay, now I'm ready to start my my federal application. I need to find a good accountant, some good software for compliance and insurance. And in effect, preparation is insurance. Nobody knows what the sausage is going to be, to use the term, but you're going to have a lot of people wanting to stay in business. And as one of my partners says, when BATF and TTB get some compliance authority, they treat it like a new toy and spend a lot of time on it. So you don't want to get caught short, and building a lot of great partnerships ahead of time is really going to help you.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I want to thank you all. I know you're all busy. Thank our attendees for joining today. I think there was a lot of great information. You know, we looked at celebrating 420 Day by bringing experts in the industry that could provide some advice around all the things. I think if you look at systems, accounting, legal, insurance, consulting advice, you know, from Harry in legality and the legal side of it all, we brought it to bear. So I appreciate you all taking time today. As I mentioned, we did record this presentation, we'll make it available. All of our panelists are obviously in the industry, know what's going on, offer some kind of service that would be helpful. And we can provide you with their contact information and getting everything together if you want to connect with anyone. And we will be following up with you to provide you more information. And we look forward to doing some of these maybe, you know, kind of in a one-off scenario or a couple at the same time in the future. So again, thanks everybody for joining, and enjoy the rest of your cocktail if you haven't already finished it. But thanks
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
We enjoyed it. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Frank.